Hello, this is Lynn Wilson, your virtual host. Welcome to the February 26th Water Commission meeting.
Now she. Okay, can everybody hear that? Okay, great. Can you hear that online, Lynn?
I sure can.
Is there anybody else online? No. So at this point in time,
There are just attendees online.
who is?
Attendees, which are.
Oh, we have the public listening in. Okay, yeah, great. Which is great transparency. Okay, so this is the meeting of the Water Commission put together by the commissioners, and it's the February 26th meeting starting 3:30. We should be finishing up about 5 o'clock. The first thing I would like to do is just make sure if there's any disclaimers or any disclosures anybody wants to make on anything at this point in time. We're not quasi-judicial in reality, so you don't really have to, but if you think you do. Okay, the only thing for me is I did meet with staff to start working on the agendas per being given that duty. So anyway, so we are going to get things lined up, and we have a lot of just quick action items today, so that'll be great too. All right, so the first thing on is we're going to do a call to order now at 3:30 and a roll call. Lynn, would you please do a roll call?
Yes, sir. Jack Hilbert,
Here.
James Eklund, Don Langley, Clark Hamelman,
Here.
Jim Morris, Roger Hudson. Is Roger Hudson's alternate Max Brooks in attendance?
Present.
Okay, thank you, Max. Frank Johns,
I'm here.
Evan Ela,
I'm here.
Harold Smithels,
Here.
Sean Tonner,
Here.
Tricia Bernhardt.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, Lynn, anything else? All righty. The next thing we're going to
Jim
move.
Morris said, Jim Morris said he was going to be online. I do not see him online, but he may come on in a little bit, and I'll let you know.
Yeah, if you would, enlighten us when he's online so we can capture that, okay? Thank you.
Yes.
So the next item is approval of the meeting minutes. However, we have two items that have been sent into staff for correction in the minutes. And we also, looks like we have a third one. So we'll open it up to the commission first, and then I'm going to talk about the other two that we have here, unless, Harold, you want to take yours on? So anybody in the commission have any corrections to the minutes you would like to see made?
Tricia Bernhardt. Let's see, how do we do that? Pull it towards you. Okay, thank you. Okay, on page 4 of 5, under where it says the commission recommended for approval of the Rural Water Authority, it lists all of the ayes, and in fact, Jim Morris was a nay. He was not an aye.
Okay.
So he should be listed as a nay.
So we have a correction on the minutes from the vote, which was what we did at that point in time was recommendation to the commissioners in order to give the Rural Water Association the $60,000. And we tracked the votes of each individual member. One of the members was marked as a yay, when in reality they were a nay, and that now will be corrected. Okay, anybody else? We have another one came in. Harold pointed out also, I believe, that let's see, there was one no vote on the Rural Water Authority, and that was the one you're talking about here? Okay, great, thank you. We did have another correction, and this came in from Barry Kager, and his request was that we had to get his title right. In the minutes, the minutes did not have his complete title for his district, so it's, I believe it needs to be adjusted, and Katie has that, but it should be, I think it's Rural Water, let's see, what is it? It is Rural Water Authority and a director of the Thunderbird Water District, Sanitation District, so we'll make those corrections. See any others? Okay, seeing no more, I would like to just call for a consensus approval. All those in favor of the minutes with the correction, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. All righty, minutes are approved, and we move on So right now, we want to go over a couple protocol items for the Water Commission and just make sure that we're clear on everything. And then we're also going to follow up on this with a discussion about where to find some of the documents and stuff, and I'll turn that over to Katie. But protocols, one of the things, when we adjourn at 5, we need to vacate this room right away because the county has other meetings scheduled right away. Like there's a planning commission meeting in here tonight. So when we get out, it's just go in the hallway, take it to the hallway, and I think we'll be fine if we can do that, okay? And that would be appreciated. Minutes and everything else will be posted and are posted up on the shared drive and SharePoint, which I got in there and was very good. I would like to recommend, there are some water plans that have been posted up there. I highly recommend that you read those. I've gone in and read them all, and I found them to be really, really enlightening. So they're pretty good. It took a long time to do the states, James, thank you, but that was a lot of water. So, but it was, so that is a good one there. If you don't think you can make a meeting, it is really, if you can, get a hold of Katie and just send an email so that they can make sure that your alternate is apprised and they can ensure that they can attend and do whatever they need to do in that regard. With that, we just keep a proper decorum and keep moving forward. There is one other thing. Well, I'll get to that discussion here in a minute. So with that, anything else on protocols, ma'am?
As staff, the only thing I would add is if you know that you're not able to attend, if you can reach out to your alternate, that would be helpful for staff. That would be the only thing I would add. Thanks.
Okay, any questions about that? All righty, moving on to the next one is member discussion. And so I think what we want to do is just keep this open as a general discussion. Any items you guys want to just talk about generally right now, but look at anything that's on the agenda, we'll get to. So please, if you think that it might fit there or we can fit it in there, please follow the agenda. But otherwise, if there's anything that the membership would like to discuss or bring up. Nope, I will just want to share one thing, and I want to thank Tricia. Tricia put together a table that outlined for a framework that we could use sometime in the near future that will show what the needs are of water. Like as an example, if we have a water provider, how much water they have, how many people they serve, how much water are there, what do they think their future needs are, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to thank her for that. If you don't know, Tricia is probably, I don't know, is anybody else in here a water engineer? Well, we got a couple of them, so that's good. And so we'll be talking about that and getting that through there. Moving on now to the next item is the Code of Conduct submittals. I got mine in, finally. Does everybody have your Code of Conduct submittals in?
Staff has received everybody but one, and I'm still working with that one person, and we'll continue to do that. So thank you.
Just to make sure my memory doesn't fail me again, that's not me, is it?
It is not you.
Thank you. So, okay, here we go. We do have a presentation today from South Metro, and we're going to turn it over to them here in a second. I do want you to know that we're going to be scheduling, I would like to schedule, as I work with staff to put together the agenda. And we spent about a couple hours working on an agenda, topic, items, future direction, things in the last couple weeks ago. So what we want to try to do is make sure we get the commission up to speed together. So we will be bringing in water providers, service providers, anybody, water entities that can then talk to us about what they have to offer, what they're doing, how it's going on. I think we need to know that because let's just put it together. Quite frankly, we got to begin to figure out where we're at before we can figure out where we need to go and develop that gap analysis, which was on your table. So that was good. So without any other, yes, Frank?
Comment on that. The technical advisory committee contacts were sent out. For Denver Water, it listed the retired.
Oh, okay.
Denver Water, Jim Lockhead.
Right.
At the subsurface water symposium this past week, I was sitting with Greg Johnson with Denver Water. He's their head of planning. He should be the one on the list.
Okay, and that-
He actually said that he was contacted, received an email, and was kind of waiting to find out what's coming on.
Cool. Do you have that name, Katie? Okay, good. Thank you very much, Frank. we'll get that going. Okay, would like to turn it over now, if we can, to South Metro Water. And if you could introduce yourselves, what you're going to be showing us, so we know what to expect, and then we can go from there.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa Darling. I'm the Executive Director at the South Metro Water Supply Authority. And as I think you discussed in one of your previous meetings, South Metro is currently undergoing an update to our master planning process. So I thought I'd come today and give you a little background on where we were and where we are, and then I can tell you a little bit about where we're going. So this is a little bit about the agenda. You know, not many people know that South Metro as an authority is not that old. In fact, we're celebrating our 20th anniversady this year.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I want to apologize for interrupting
Of course.
briefly, but I just need to know, do you want all questions at the end, or do you want to take questions as they come up?
You know, I'm completely okay either way. So
Please just raise your hand and get my
I'll-
attention, okay?
Whoops.
Great, thank you.
I think I was sitting, hold on. I think I just leaned on the arrow. So no, I leave it up to the Mr. Chair, whatever you'd prefer to do. All right, so some of you might be familiar with this. This was actually a document, a map that the Denver Water Board put out in the 1950s. You can find this in the Colorado History Museum. At the time, it was a big neighborhood boom. And it was also a time of a very long and protracted drought. So Denver actually drew a line, a blue line for water, a brown line for wastewater, and said that outside of these lines, no one could have expectation of service, which meant that generally everyone was undergoing immediate water supply planning to make sure that their future demands were met. Now, that's much later than that, getting closer to the 80s. That was when many of you have probably heard of Two Forks. Two Forks was a large reservoir project that was located near Deckers, and many of the communities in the Front Range were actually part of that project. And that was actually vetoed by the EPA in 1989, vetoed by EPA headquarters, not Region 8 here in town. And many water providers had counted on that particular project to shore up some of their water supplies, particularly many of the South Metro communities. So other communities, other water providers had other plans in place, but the South Metro communities were all very small, had very small staff, if any staff at all, that dealt with water. And you'll recall at that time, Douglas County was also one of the fastest growing counties in the country. So those two things combined caused a problem because all of that growth was being developed upon the non-tributary groundwater that lays under the surface. And it was a tremendous economic time for our region, but folks could tell that there was going to be a problem. So this is what we saw. You could see that in that time, in the 80s, we were seeing declines of about 30% of the groundwater. And it was becoming more and more dire as people were watching the growth continue to exceed every expectation. So a couple of studies were begun. The 1999 study was probably one of the first ones that actually recognized this ongoing issue of development of growth on non-tributary groundwater. You see, in 2003, the South Metro Water Supply Study was completed. That was with the South Metro water communities, but it was also Denver Water, the state, and many of the West Slope entities, because everybody could see that there was a looming problem and they wanted to know what the solution was going to be. And this actually led to the formation of the South Metro Water Supply Authority. So those of you who actually remember the Rocky Mountain News, this was some of the headlines that people were seeing at the time. You can see this is from the early 2000s. You know, Governor Romer was actually suggesting that folks had to put signs on their front yards to indicate that their property would be running out of water at some time. So it was a pretty dire time. So this is why we were formed. And initially the goal was really that, shift away from the renewable sources, the non-renewable sources of water to sustainable sources of water. But the plan really began to kind of grow and evolve, I would say, really based on these pillars. So it's partnerships. We could rely upon our relationships with one another to try to develop cooperative plans. We could use investment strategies. Costs per unit would be less if we worked together. And then we were going to really focus on efficiency. We wanted to be leaders in conservation and reuse every drop of water that we could. So this is a current map of who we are. We're 14 members now, serving more than 375,000 people, projected to serve over 500,000 people by 2050. Our providers cover about 80% of Douglas County and about 10% of Arapahoe County. As part of our master plan update, we will be taking a look at all of these demographics and updating those as well. So we've done a number of master plans. We did master plans in 2004, 2007, 2011, 2017, and we're now undergoing our next update. What we've seen is we really have made tremendous progress in the last 2 decades. We shifted our supplies. In the early 2000s, 60% of our members were 60% reliant upon non-renewable. Some of the largest water providers were actually 100% non-renewable. By 2020, we projected that we were going to be at 20%. By build-out, we'll be down to 15 to 17%. Now, you're never going to be completely off of non-tributary groundwater. It's a good supply, it's a good drought supply, and so that's conjunctive use. That's the process by which water managers can manage their supplies in times when it's dry or average. You can utilize those aquifers. And we have some entities that are almost completely renewable on average. In conservation and efficiency, we've also had tremendous progress. We've reduced our per capita water demands by 30%. We currently average 120 GPCD, that's gallons per capita per day. That's less for single family, and that's also less than the first Colorado Water Plan had as a goal for 2050. So we've already exceeded that goal. The region's set to reuse all of the supplies that we're legally able to, as I said. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the most recent master plan update. So it was really 3 phases. And if you think about it, this is really what you'll see in a lot of the water plans that I'm sure you're already reviewing. It's determination of supplies and demands. That's that gap analysis that you talk about, trying to determine if you have the supplies to meet your future demands. It's the optimization of existing infrastructure, which obviously shared infrastructure is going to be more efficient to operate than going it alone. And then identification and evaluation of potential new projects. And so I'll go over each of these phases of the master plan to kind of talk about where we left off. All right, so we'll start with the determination of supplies and demand. So here was an overview of how they reached the supply and demand analysis. The people who were working on the 2017 plan, some of whom are still here in the room, took a great deal of time to meet together and gather supply and demand data that each had. So you'll look and see that we had planning years. So 2013, that was our last actual data that we had to use. 2020, 2030, 2050, and 2065. So in the supply determination, we gathered data on the existing and planned water supply sources, and then we had a tracking tool. It was just an Excel-based tool that actually gave the members an opportunity to track their supplies and demands at those different planning years. And please don't hesitate to interrupt me if you have a question. This is an example of the template. This is just an Excel spreadsheet, and you can actually see it was just, kind of a lock and load. You just go ahead and input the data in the appropriate fields, and it would give you the calculation of your supply and demand portfolio. So this was the result of the demand analysis. So these were the demands by year, and you can see in 2065 we were projected to have demands of approximately 120,000 acre feet. These are all in acre feet. So then, yes, sir.
I'm assuming that the color coding is water providers or?
That's correct. And so
Right,
what South
okay.
Metro did in its final report, it rolled everyone up.
Okay.
So that's the aggregate for the authority. And the authority's members at that time, which has changed slightly. We've had a couple losses and a couple gains.
This is current demand.
This was in the 2017 master plan data that was gathered at that time, and we're updating that in '24.
But it's current demand, not future.
No, this is projected future demand.
Okay.
And I'm just going to interject briefly as staff. Please do use your microphones when you're asking questions or making comments so people online can hear you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, was that?
That's good, thank you.
Okay.
Lisa, can you hear me?
Yeah.
On the 80% right now, you guys are saying are on renewable sources. So of that 76,000 acre feet, that is the current demand? Correct, yeah.
Well, so now that was the projected demand from 2013 actual numbers and projected demand based on the population and demographic numbers that they were working with at that time. So this will be updated for the same, 2030, 2050, 2065, and then we'll talk a little bit about the updates going to 2075 now.
Okay,
Is that, okay.
yeah, clear as mud. Thanks.
So as I mentioned, we also did a supplies analysis. And so what we did was we asked for more detailed information from each of our members regarding the planned supplies that they had. So we had 5 categories: the non-trib groundwater, the alluvial groundwater, surface water, reuse and recapture, and WISE supplies. We also asked them to label non-renewable and renewable resource and whether or not it was current or pending, because that was also going to give us the information about how they plan to use that supply. Now, one of the main renewable sources you'll see is WISE. 10 of our members participate in the WISE agreement, so I thought I'd play, it's just a very short video. I thought I'd play just as a reminder of what WISE is.
Miles from the mountains, there's a new water partnership flowing on the prairie.
This is big, it's very impressive, and we think it's the wave of the future.
The partnership is a collaborative approach to share and reuse mountain water.
You take a shower, that water runs down the drain. Where does it go? It goes to water treatment and put back into the South Platte River, where it can be recaptured and reused.
The innovative water plan is called WISE.
WISE stands for Water, Infrastructure, and Supply Efficiency. It's a creative way of making more efficient use of existing water supplies and infrastructure.
WISE is a regional partnership between Denver Water, Aurora Water, and 10 utilities from the South Metro Water Supply Authority in Arapahoe and Douglas counties. Here's how WISE works. Denver and Aurora Water use rivers and streams to bring water down from the mountains. After customers use the water in their homes, it goes to a wastewater treatment facility, but the water doesn't meet drinking water standards yet. The treated water goes back into the South Platte River and flows downstream from Denver. Water heads north on the South Platte toward Brighton, where it's recaptured and filtered naturally at the Prairie Waters Complex, owned by Aurora Water. The water gets turned around and pumped through a pipeline 34 miles to the Binney Water Purification Facility next to Aurora Reservoir.
The water that we're providing is highly treated, meets or exceeds all drinking water standards. It's the highest quality water we can provide.
Drinking water leaves the Binney plant and flows to homes and businesses in the WISE service area.
We can do this water loop basically forever and keep bringing it back through the system until it's finally used to exhaustion.
Aurora Water built the Prairie Waters system in response to the drought of 2002 and to meet water demand for the city's growing population. The WISE agreement lets Denver Water share Prairie Waters pipes and treatment facilities.
Denver Water and Aurora Water have water rights that can be used over and over again. It's called reusable water. Denver has rights to this reusable water, but has no way to get it back up into the Denver metro area. Through the use of WISE infrastructure, Denver Water now has access to a new water supply that it can use during times of drought.
During non-drought years, Denver and Aurora Water occasionally have reusable water available to sell to South Metro WISE members. Those utilities have relied heavily on drilling rigs to tap into an underground aquifer. But with rapid growth in the region, water in the aquifer is drying up.
This water sharing agreement actually gives tremendous value to our South Metro members in the WISE partnership. As a goal, we had to move towards sustainable water resources, and WISE meets that challenge head on and takes us a long way towards a sustainable water future.
WISE benefits Aurora Water by helping offset the costs of its Prairie Waters system. The partnership also helps protect water on the west slope.
One of the great benefits of the WISE project is that it recycles our water supplies. So that way we don't have to take more water out of our streams and rivers, so we can meet more demands with the same volume of water.
WISE will provide a reliable and sustainable water supply for more than 2 million people in the metro area.
It's so critical when you're choosing a home, when you're raising your children, that you know that your quality of life will never be impacted by a lack of safe, clean drinking water, and WISE gives us that.
Water is scarce in the West, and we have to make sure that we're making the best use of every drop of water that we have. And that's what the WISE project does.
You guys probably didn't recognize me with my glasses, but I always do like to joke, you know, Dave Bennett and Joe Stibrich are both good friends, both retired now, but they both got filmed by a river and by a lake, and I was filmed in the smoking section outside my building in the DTC. Like, that's the best they could do for us at South Metro. But the water supply benefits, you know, are incredible for all three parties. For Aurora, as it says, it offset the PWP costs with greater annual revenues than $10 million, as it has turned out. They had a $680 million project that after the drought recovery, this made good use of that infrastructure. Of course, South Metro has a renewable supply. It's 100,000 acre feet over a 10-year block period. That's fully reusable water. And then it allows us, again, on that conjunctive use, to use our Denver Basin aquifer for drought supply. And then lastly, Denver Water, who has no infrastructure in that same area, could use that as drought and emergency supplies. So it really was regional cooperation. And I think for those of you who know that water in Colorado tends to be a fairly contentious matter, often handled in court, this had no elements of that. This truly was three partners coming to a table to realize benefit. And I think when you look at the total population, which of course is now even greater than 2 million folks, I think that was a real win-win. So we're really proud of that effort. And it's about 10 years old as well. WISE has been in place since 2013. So this is one of the graphs that was determined in the historic and projected supplies. And the thing that I really want you to notice is, so you have the total demands, the non-renewable and the renewable resources, but then you'll see that there's a planned renewable, and that's sort of the hatched area. Those were the projects that were pending in that 2015, 2017 time. And then the renewable goal was to be filled by new projects. So that was the goal of the 2017 master plan, to meet those additional demands. Now, I will add that the demands in the master plan in 2017 had a 10% additional contingency added upon it as an additional planning number, just to ensure that the demands that were identified were being appropriately planned. So these are the assumptions. So it assumed the full implementation of pending supplies, lower cost alternatives to pending supplies, because obviously we're mindful of our ratepayers, and then lower cost alternatives to pending supplies. And we did look at a full replacement of the non-tributary groundwater sources. So then let's look at the optimization of existing infrastructure. So this is what we did. We looked at available capacity, and that was grouped existing assets for moving water north to south, west to east, and then other infrastructure that was available. Then once we identified the infrastructure that had available capacity for sharing, the water supplies were then documented on the groundwater. You can see in renewable water owned by the potential regional partners, assuming that the infrastructure and the water could be made available for all members. It also conceptualized supply options. So it looked at the timing, the quantity, the geographic compatibility of all of those available supplies and infrastructure for those supply solutions, and that was that renewable goal. So then lastly, we had an identification and evaluation of potential new projects. So you can see that with the supply and demand information that was gathered, we really started to look at new projects and new opportunities for that volume to get those outcomes that we needed. And that included the renewable goals that we had already identified, particularly, as many of you know, during summer peaking and dry hydraulic years. The lower cost was pretty essential to us all, but they had to be collaborative alternatives. We were looking at storage as a tool. Storage is very valuable. I'm sure most of you know about Ruder Hess is a tremendous success story. The Chatfield reallocation is another. Additional storage to help firm those supplies was important. And then we were facilitating opportunities for collaboration. I think once people got WISE under their skin, they thought that was a great opportunity and they wanted to explore more. So now let's go to our update. So we're replicating many of those same processes that you saw in the 2017 master plan update, but now we're extending that study to 2075. We're in the process of updating demand growth. In 2017, the projected demand had been expected to grow by 48% in that 2013 to 2020 range. I don't believe we've seen that. Douglas County's assumed population growth rate was 2.5% per year, which would equate to a demand growth of 21%. So we're going to be verifying and updating those numbers. So we'll also have updated plans, projects, and revised with new opportunities, and that's utilizing member interviews and data and plans that they have provided. We're going to update our conservation, reuse, and education initiatives because I believe that we've really come a long way towards all three of those goals. We're also going to add this time consideration service areas currently outside our provider connections, including the rural well users. I certainly heard at your last two meetings that that was an important element that you were looking at, and to the extent that we can and we can gather that data, we'll incorporate that as well. We're also going to incorporate other planning efforts. For example, Arapahoe County is undergoing a current water study, which South Metro is participating in. So we're going to try to incorporate as much information as we can that's available currently, and then we'll move forward with our master plan update. So this is generally the schedule that we're going through. So we're doing data gathering and analysis through probably about June of this year. Then we're going to hold member meetings and workshop to review those draft results. We're going to have ongoing legal review. I believe, I'm not sure if it was Commissioner Langley said last time, but someone pointed out, it might have been Commissioner Johns, that the legal barriers can sometimes make it difficult to share information. So we are going to be going through, legal reviews with each member as well as the authorities' legal counsel just to ensure that the information is appropriate for release. We'll be doing regional messaging that will be developed to support the master plan, and we're hoping to have something completed in the late summer, early fall of this year. So I just have one more thing, and this is really kind of a shout out to James, or Commissioner Eklund. James was in the helm when the first water plan was completed in 2015. And now, of course, it's been updated as well in 2023. South Metro, though, on behalf of our members and for the benefit of our membership, we do take a role in the regional state initiatives. But the new water plan takes this 50-50 approach to action. The state wants to support through grant funding and their supporting tools, the DSS tools, their decision support tools, and collaboration. That's called agency actions in the plan, but the real work happens at the local level, and that's the partner actions. And there are 50 of each of those in the 2023 plan. So we will be looking to coordinate our master plan and 2024 results to meet some of those partner actions. It includes multiple benefit, multiple users, and I think that that's important. But of course, the counties do play an important role. The vision for vibrant communities, for example, includes water conservation and land use planning in coordination with water supply planning that's being done at the provider level. And there's definitely a coordination lift that can happen there. But as they're calling it, the One Water ethic really does need local leadership. We appreciate our partnership with the county. We work great with staff, and we have recently received funds to support our conservation effort. We'll be talking to staff to come back again in 2024 to renew that commitment. We look forward to working with you. And on that, and I totally took this from Parker, this is what they say. They say discussions, questions, and answers to the extent that I can. But anyway, that's all I have for you today. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Harold?
Thank you. That was an excellent presentation, a great background, Lisa. As you gather this data, you mentioned that you're going to be looking now for the first time at the water districts that are not part of WISE.
Correct.
Rural water users. Will you be gathering this same information from them? Where will the demand and needs and forecasts from the smaller districts that are not part of WISE come into this planning?
That's a great question, Commissioner Smettles. To the extent that information exists and we're able to obtain it. I think that the most difficult thing is quantifying the number of districts and well users, and then trying to put that, connect that to a demand number that's appropriate. So what we're finding is there's patchy information, but we're going to do our best to put together what's available. Yes, please.
I can ask a follow-on question.
Yep.
Is that something that the county or the Water Commission might be helpful in providing resources to get that data, what the demands are? And they're not going to have the sophisticated future use, but they sure know what their current demands are. And perhaps decline curves, if they have them on their wells and that type of thing, might be very helpful to this.
Oh, absolutely, and we would appreciate the commission's any assistance. And what we're really looking for is partnership. If there's information that the commission can bring to bear on the work, I think that would be tremendous.
Okay. Miss Darling.
Yeah.
I'll just call you Lisa. East Cherry Creek Valley.
Yes, sir.
The map is way up in Arapahoe County.
Yes, sir.
Did they take over Willows? What's that whole thing there? 'Cause I know they took over Willows Water District.
Right. They do have the Willows well field as part of their water portfolio that is here in Douglas County. That's correct.
Do they serve what used to be Willows Water District?
I don't believe so. That's a good question. I'm just like, here, let me look over here.
Denver Water serves.
Okay, that's what I was wondering okay. And then, so you have entities that serve both Arapahoe County and Douglas County.
A couple, yeah.
Yeah, so for our purpose, we'd have to filter those out. And
We're hoping that we can work together and help both aggregate and then disaggregate, so you'll get an impression of what the Douglas County's position in supply and demand would be.
Lisa, this is Evan. You said that the WISE has been in effect for about 10 years. What kind of yields have you gotten? Have you gotten close to 10,000 a year or something less than that?
We have gotten something less than that. And Commissioner Ela is asking a very good question. WISE is still what we call under development. There was a phase-in period that was actually anticipated in the first water delivery agreement, and we are technically still in that phase-in period. There's a couple of pieces of infrastructure that haven't been connected yet. Once those pieces are connected, WISE will go fully operational, and so we're expecting that to happen next year. And the WISE year goes June 1st through May 31st, because no one can have a water year that seems to correlate to anything with anybody else. So it's June 1st, 2025 is our goal for that infrastructure.
By the way, Mr. Mars has joined us online, and he has a question. Jim, why don't you go ahead and give us your question?
Thank you. My question is related to if you guys have taken a look at or plan on looking at what is termed as unaccounted for water or non-revenue water, as reducing those losses and trying to, find that water to help with some of this future growth.
Thank you for your question. So the provider plans all take into account their system losses. They quantify those system losses. The difficult thing is if you aggregate everyone's service area on top and then try to come up with some sort of average loss number. But most of the water providers actually do take into account the system losses that they realize. And I think that it should probably go without saying, everyone's looking to minimize those losses, those unintended losses.
Clark?
Lisa, do you put this plan together completely within your staff, or do you use an outside water consulting organization to help you put the plan together?
So that's a great question. What we're doing this time in the master plan for 2024 is we do have consultants working with us, but the effort really is primarily staff-driven. So the firm that did the master plan in 2017 has been working with us, and also the regional messaging consultant that was with us is working with us. But it's primarily a staff-driven plan, because what's happened in the interim since the 2015, 2017 is most of the providers have really sophisticated water plans in place. And so now it's really a collation and putting together the information more than trying to create those plans. Not that that was the majority of the case, but that was still a significant amount of that effort. And since the tools are already in place as well, and they still work, what we're hoping is we can use that information to translate that.
That does leave out the piece that's missing is the rural, where there are no existing plans to draw from. And can you just talk a little bit more about, I know you answered Harold's question, but can you just talk a little bit more about what your process or what your thoughts are about how you're going to incorporate the rural, or aren't you that far yet?
Well, we're going down that path. And here's the fact. I think it's a concern for everyone in Douglas County. How that situation can best be managed. No one wants it to be a future challenge. So having a plan in place. So what I have seen is a number of studies that have existed for different homeowners association groups and different smaller districts. So what we'll probably try to do is utilize as much of that as possible. But it's a concern for us all. They're not in our provider areas, but still we understand that that's an issue.
Yeah, Evan?
Lisa, another question. I think I heard in your presentation that you said all of your members are 100% ready to reuse or reuse 100%. I mean, is that from a legal perspective or a physical perspective, and are you there yet? I mean, I wouldn't think so. But.
Okay, so I'll take that backwards. No, we're not there yet. Everyone has different plans for the recapture of return flows. We have a couple zero discharge providers, but for the most part, reuse is considered in all of the member plans. And the answer to your question, the second question, is whatever's legally reusable. One of the biggest benefits for WISE is that it's a completely reusable supply. It can be recaptured and reused in our service areas. So I think that that's where we're moving forward on, and I think that we're going to see a lot of development in that in the next 10 years.
Tricia?
Okay, just a little clarity on the WISE issue. Lisa, you said that right now the members are using less than 10 acre feet per year. Still not hearing me.
I apologize. It's just difficult to hear a question.
I think you stated that the members are using less than 10 acre feet of WISE water per year. Is that, what is the actual estimate of how much WISE water is getting used by the 10 members that are participating?
Do you mean once it's fully operational, once those two pieces of infrastructure?
Right now.
So right now, I believe that the proposed offer for the upcoming year is 3,000 acre feet.
Okay. And when you said there's missing infrastructure, exactly what is that missing infrastructure?
So there's a temporary connection that's currently in place. So what happens is Denver and Aurora have an operational agreement whereby they co-join their supplies. And right now, there's a temporary connection, and the temporary connection allows Aurora, so Denver and Aurora commingle their supplies. We're actually provided the actual water from Aurora, from their water treatment plants. So there was a temporary connection that was put into place until the development of a permanent connection at the Benny treatment plant that you saw in the video. So the Benny treatment plant will be completed, we're hoping sometime in the next 6 months. That temporary connection actually has a connection choke point, and during summer and peak times, we can't receive more than a certain amount of water because it starts to affect fire flows. And so we're capped currently at that temporary connection, and that's why until that permanent connection is in place. The permanent connection's 30 MGD. So once that 30 MGD connection's in place, we'll be able to get all of the WISE supplies, and those can be made available to us. The second piece is there's a connection from DIA, from Denver International Airport line. That's what's called their blend supply under the water delivery agreement, and that is currently being designed and put out for bid for construction. And so until that time, Denver can't, because of the CRCA, the Colorado River Cooperative Agreement, Denver is constricted by the types of water that they can provide to WISE. Once that's connected, they'll be able to fully realize their supplies.
Complicated.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Frank?
Yeah, just one other clarification. I mean, you showed, 100,000 over 10 years, right? Acre feet. And if Aurora all of a sudden needs all the water, they can use all the water.
So yes and no. So yes, what the agreement does is the WISE agreement anticipated that Aurora would want to use their own project at times when it was designed to be used, which for them was during dry and drought periods. So the WISE agreement, if you really want to have a good night's sleep, read the WISE agreement, and it will tell you that there are max and min delivery points. So we can be interrupted. So Aurora can interrupt us, and it can go down to 0 for a period of up to 24 months, no more in a block tenure period. And then it's also determined by flows. There's minimum flows and maximum flows by month. And so it's pretty locked down to ensure that the commitment will be made.
James?
Lisa, good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
And thank you for sponsoring the Subsurface Water Storage Symposium that Commissioner Johns referenced earlier. It was really a great 2-day program that I learned a ton from just a number of engineers, including your own Eric Jorgensen. Who's that, Eric? That was really comprehensive in his detailing of how some maybe potentially excess water that is above and beyond what the WISE participants can use right now might be able to be used to recharge the aquifer, which is absolutely fascinating to me, given that I think of the Denver Basin as this huge piece of largely unused infrastructure underneath our feet. Other parts of the country that I'm familiar with through doing the water planning exercise, Orange County and of course Phoenix and the Edwards Aquifer in Texas, and there are many other examples. When they see a piece of infrastructure like the one we have, they use it, and they use it very efficiently and effectively. And I kind of took the symposium that we were at and Eric's great presentation as maybe a kickoff for us to be thinking in a fresh way about our natural infrastructure underneath our feet. So I don't know if there's a question in there, but I guess it would be, do you have any comment on kind of that general mass balance of excess water from WISE potentially being used to recharge the aquifer?
No, that's a great point, James. And so the corollary to the 0, the interruptions, is that in other years we can get as much as 26,000 acre-feet of water. And of course, 26,000 acre-feet of water may be over and above a base demand, right? Ideally, you'd want WISE delivering and it would just go straight into a demand node. At times when it's not, you're going to go on to your other water supplies. And times when you're getting excess water, no one wants to let go of excess water. So the project that, and Eric's doing a great job on this project, it's a regional ASR concept. We got state support to look at it, whereby you would take the sweetest spots of the aquifer. And generally speaking, say a location in the south, a location on the west, a location on the east. And then you would actually use the aquifer as a regional storage, ASR storage hub. And because we're connected, because now we have these interconnections between the members, that would facilitate the actual moving and booking over of water. And, ASR could be such a tremendous tool. There's obviously power implications, control implications, how you manage to inject and then take it back out when you need it. But you don't have the evaporation you have on surface supplies. So there's a lot of real positives. And so hopefully we're in phase 1. So we're hoping that we can continue to look at that.
Yeah, Evan, go ahead.
I have one more follow-up on that, and because I don't intend to sit and read the whole WISE agreement. But if you do get excess water in a given year and you're able to capture it and hold it in a reservoir or somewhere, Aurora's not able to claim any of that back, right? They can just interrupt you when they're delivering, but nothing after that.
Right. So the whole concept, and I apologize because this really could put you to sleep. But the whole concept is there's a take or pay provision, and that take or pay provision's defined. If Aurora and Denver offer more than the required take or pay, quantity, it's up to South Metro to decide whether or not they want to accept that additional water, and if they accept that additional water, where they store it. So that allows that vacillation in supplies and available tools like storage allows us to take advantage of those times when they're offering us greater supplies, and it's more than we need to meet demand.
Yeah, Harold?
Engineer for that. Two questions. One on, first off, this work is vitally important. It's very much needed by the county, and thank you so much for leading the effort to get it done and updated. A question on definition. One of the things that's always concerned me is non-renewable water that is discharged into a creek. Someone takes it downstream and calls that, because it's off the stream, renewable. And I think it's important, if we can, to get to a net, because if that non-renewable goes away, so does somebody else's renewable, if you follow what I'm saying.
Well, so sometimes, and thank you, that's a very good clarifying question, and I often perhaps use the terms not interchangeably, but they're often in the same conversation. Reusable supplies can be recaptured and reused according to the priority system. If you have reusable supplies and they're decreed reusable, if you have control and dominion over those supplies, you can bring them back into your system and you use them as long to extinction.
Sure.
Non-renewable water is actually reusable. So it can get a little wonky. So non-renewable water that's discharged into a system that's being administered and not being recaptured to be reused would be made available to whoever's the next person down on the stream. But it would retain whatever the decree provisions are that they were taking the water supply under.
And it may be too wonky to get it done, but it would be helpful to understand what our net needs are, so we're not double counting as we reuse a non-renewable supply.
Right. The gap analysis, or if there is a gap, takes into account the reuse of supplies.
And then the other question, I wish to follow up on the non-major systems, the rural systems and that. This work is vitally important. It would be a shame to go through this gap supply and leave the other out. And I do believe it's also probably unfair to ask the WISE member, and full disclosure, the district I represent is a WISE member, to pay for that. So it would seem, since many of you are WISE members, but it would seem that a thoughtful request to the county or to this group or somewhere, one, on how you get the information to make it more than as close to required as possible, and assistance to get it, and then second, to pay for that so it doesn't work against your budgets, might be very appropriate and something I hope you consider.
Thank you, Commissioner Smettles. It's really important. I don't want to overpromise. There's information that's out there, but I think we've all known that it's been a challenge for quite some time. And I certainly heard at the Commission's last two meetings, that the situation, the challenge came up. But we're all in this together. So to the extent that we can incorporate that and we can incorporate those numbers, my understanding, and it's just very general, is that it's the infrastructure. It's going to be getting connections to the people, and that costs money. So I think that's.
And you're right, the infrastructure is the big killer, but if you don't know the demand, it's hard to size the infrastructure and estimate it.
Absolutely.
So there's a chicken and egg going on, and so we really need to get a good handle on that, and if you're having difficulty getting the information, whatever, that's the kind of thing that the county, the protection of its own people, needs to know.
Sean?
Kind of piggybacking on reusable supplies, WISE, Denver, Aurora. So if kind of game planning out, and I'm sure you all either are doing it or going to do it in the plan, if our major providers, Denver, Aurora, Colorado Springs, if they are required to take a haircut on the Colorado, the reusable water they take off the western slope, what does that do to Wise?
So the agreement, actually, that's a really good question. And particularly since 2013, since the agreement was signed, I mean, I think that we've seen the Colorado River just worsening, the situation just worsening. What I can say, though, is that that's why Prairie Waters was really developed. I mean, that was the goal. To the extent that we're now in that infrastructure and it's dictated, there's not a whole lot, I think, that Denver, or particularly Aurora, with the use of that infrastructure can do. You know, there's always force majeure, but the force majeure doesn't cover, I think, specific hydraulic situations, although it does recognize, the agreement does have a provision that says that should things happen that impacts that, the parties will work together to find solutions. Most people think that that would be, you know, it would be an interim. It wouldn't be a permanent solution. In addition, I think that Denver and Aurora have both done assessments about the impact of the Colorado River. Should their supplies get impacted? And that was one of the things that I think was taken into account in 2013. So we're hopeful that the supply forecasts will withstand that kind of analysis. But it is covered in the WDA, so, in the water delivery agreement, I'm sorry.
So that includes like compact reallocation?
Well, so compact, you know, that we could talk all afternoon about that scary situation, but it does try to anticipate a situation where hydraulic changes would actually drive a need to address it in the agreement, and the partners are hopeful that we can do that. Yeah.
Other questions? I have a couple.
Oh, yes, please.
You were talking about Wise, and it just brought to my mind, I was thinking, so if they are releasing water and they're making it available to somebody to take, and it's not taken, it's a one-time offer, right? And so Wise, so in other words, we've got 3,000 acre foot available, it doesn't roll over to the next year. It's literally take it now or don't take it, and then you have to go to the next release.
On a year-to-year basis, that is actually true. It doesn't. So what it is, instead of, I think most of you, probably many of you, have actually experienced decrees that have rolling block volumetrics. This particular agreement was actually drafted as a 10-year block. It's a defined 10-year block that has requirements for delivery. So while it's not technically carried over year to year, that aggregate amount that's is an obligation for Denver and Aurora does carry over for year to year, if that makes sense, because at the end of that 10-year block, they do have to have met that obligation.
And if it doesn't?
I'm sorry?
And if it doesn't meet the obligation?
Then they would be out of compliance with the agreement.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand. So if water's made available from Aurora or Denver, a water provider that is a member of WISE has an opportunity to ask or to procure some of that water that they're making available. Is that correct?
So what happens is, and again, I apologize, and if this gets to be, you can just get the giant hook and pull me off. But what happens is Denver and Aurora co-join their supplies. We're given an offer, and that offer is made, and it's usually, they try to maintain it. It's difficult to change delivery offers because of the machinations of the operations. They make an offer, and there's actually a web portal where every member goes on and can say that they want their pro rata share of that offer. If someone declines to take their pro rata share, it's made available to the other members to take over and beyond their pro rata share. So it's all very mechanized. It's all very automated.
And the cost of that water at that point is based on
The WISE rate is actually set every year as a combination of Denver's raw water rate, and then Aurora charges a facilities charge, which is based on their operations, and a rate of return on their capital investment. I told you I could bore you.
No, not at all, because this is actually getting to what I was trying to get to here. So, water's called, water's sent, said you guys can do it. You can go in, sign up for your fair share. You take it or lose it type situation for that year. Okay, rolls over on a 10-year period. I get all of that accumulated issue, but that still presents the problem, which was what you were alluding to, I think before, that if someone wanted to obtain that water for a future use and store it, you got to have the storage and the transportation mechanism.
Well, so the transportation mechanism is, ostensibly you're connected. So the WISE water is delivered to each system at a connection. And so if you have access to storage, or if you have a storage agreement, Parker with Reuter Hess, such an excellent opportunity. They could take their pro rata share, and if they don't need it to meet base demand, they could store that water.
And then meet the requirement, not let it go back. In other words, okay.
It doesn't really technically go back. I think that the offer would just be reduced to meet what was being accepted.
Okay. Now, I'm taking this from a broad perspective.
No,
because I'm trying to
absolutely.
say there's a water opportunity, and I just don't want to see that we're missing it. That's all. And that we are taking full advantage of it at that point in time. And storage is very important at that point.
Yes.
And so that's my only concern in that regard, is that have we got the infrastructure necessary to move that water to all providers, which now takes me to my next question.
Mm-hmm.
You're not a member of WISE, but a WISE member has saved water. Can a WISE member enter an agreement to sell that WISE water they took to a non-member water provider?
So the answer to that is complicated, but if you think most water providers have an opportunity to do spot sales, system sales, and that just when you have water, excess water. When I was at Aurora Water for 20 years. When I was at Aurora, I used to sell excess effluent to a spot sale to anybody who wanted available water, because otherwise I was just letting it go down the system. Once water is in your system, most people, once it gets into treatment, it's into distribution, it loses the color of what it was. So then it's just water in your portfolio. And if you have provisions whereby you can make those sales or enter into those lease term available agreements, then I don't think that there is a provision that would prevent you from doing that. Now, the WISE agreement, though, and who can take WISE water, there's provisions. We could add additional WISE providers, for example, through a complicated vetting and nomination system. They could be allowed to join. Okay. But most people have their subscription. WISE is fully subscribed. Thank you to the county for the reservation water agreement that they did at the time. But WISE is fully subscribed now. But subscriptions in WISE is a sellable position.
Great. Any other questions, guys? Sean?
So at the end of 10 years, you look back, make sure everything was copacetic, we make up all the water we didn't get. Then do you re-up for another 10 years? Does the plan roll forward? Does it get renegotiated?
The agreement's in perpetuity.
Perfect. Okay.
Great.
So it just resets.
But it's 10-year increments. Okay.
10-year blocks.
Yeah, okay, got it. So that does make sense. I have one question you talked about earlier, and I remember those when we did that, when you initially kicked off all those studies and everything, the reusable water rates and the actual per capita use is down, and you showed that graph to showing that is down. So is that across the board, like the whole county? That seems like, in other words, we've got enough reuse, enough conjunctive use issues, conservation, that the per capita use then has decreased across county totally. Is that correct?
I would say that is correct. I think since 2002 and 2003, when many people started to incorporate conservation and demand management into their portfolios and into the way that they manage their supplies, we have seen a distinct decline. And even though we're seeing growth, we're still seeing a reduction in use. The danger with GPCD is it can be apples and oranges because it's calculated on a different basis from different providers. So you're going to see a lot of people are moving away from that number. And for example, Dominion, one of our members, I think you're down to 0.25 per home.
Well, it depends on the home, but 0.2 to 0.18.
0.2 to 0.18. When we were, 25 years ago, when I was negotiating the Roxborough agreement with Larry Moore back at the time, it was 0.48 per home. So if you think about what we're seeing, the significance of what we're seeing in terms of household demand, I think it's huge, particularly in new developments. I think you're going to see the greatest efficiencies.
Great. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you so very much. I'm sure there's some other questions, but we appreciate it.
Happy to do that. Thank you. we'll look forward to coming back.
Please.
And I know that you're going to be hearing from some of the water providers about their specific plans, but you have my contact information, and I'd love to talk about this with you, so don't hesitate to reach out.
I want one thing. Online, Jim, do you have any questions?
No, I do not. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you
Great.
so much.
I think that's got it. Thank you very much. All right. Well, then that was pretty interesting. I was the commissioner when we started doing all that, and we did that reserve fund, and we did all that stuff. But to see how far it's come and where it's at now, it's kind of interesting. Interesting. I want to move on now to our next step, which is I want to ask Katie a question first. So what we're going to do right now, because I do want to make sure that we have an opportunity to talk about SharePoint, make sure everybody's getting in and stuff, and just have the staff show you how that SharePoint is working. So, but in the meantime, we're going to move on to the next item, which is the 2050 water plan and what I think the commission is working on. So I'm going to tee this up in a way, just as I see it and feel it, and you guys can add on or take away or disagree or whatever. But I can tell you, I think it's important that we create a framework by which how we move forward with this. And that framework has got a lot of components in it, like what are you currently getting? What do you currently need? What is the deviation? How much is waste? How much can we actually store? What's the cost? One of the big problems going to be is financing all of these entities. There's a cost associated with this water. And so, I mean, stuff is fungible. Let's face it, it's just going back and forth, back and forth. But in order to create that framework, because I sat down and was thinking about it over and over and over, and don't get me wrong, but I know I don't have the expertise to drive that kind of a total framework. But I also, in listening to the staff, and even Lisa just supported that whole thing right there, and that is, but there is work going on by entities out there, and I would think, and we can discuss this, that we should probably try to get a consultant in to help us create, I think, what's going to be a working framework so that we're not wasting time. Because we can listen to all of this, but we got to have an entity or a person or a group or somebody gathering this and helping us put it together who's got some knowledge and stuff of that. I know one of the things that was brought to my attention was I think Mr. Kroger was working with Arapahoe and with Elbert and El Paso. Lives in Douglas County. So it might be an option that we might recommend to the county commissioners that we seek a consultant to help us come together and put together a plan, our plan in this one. And I know that was going to be one of the things that I was looking at, because we've got somebody working all of these, and it sounds like they might even be working with Lisa in them. But your thoughts on that concept, guys? Harold?
Agree more. I think looking at a consultant to help us bring it together. Also, that consultant and maybe some or all of this group working with South Metro, if they're doing this kind of plan, maybe we should set the appointment about an early fall to come back where they're going to be or whoever that is, and then make sure we're bolting on. I keep coming back to the rural users. I think we could, that would really be a tremendous basis for the plan, but I think we should, as a commission, as a county, should have a consultant working with us, working with South Metro to bring this all together for 2050 plan.
Any other thought, Frank?
Yeah, I mean, I think, what the data collection that Lisa talked about is the same thing we need to do. And so even if we use their format and then we reach out to those others or whatever it is, or our consultant reaches out to the others, but that's the same data that we would need to collect. The only thing that would be missing is maybe from the Planning Commission, what's the total increase in the population, because there's areas that are not in current districts that we need to know. I mean, there may be new districts, right? But they would start out maybe as rural, but we need to know what else they have planned out there.
Yeah, I think if I can just reiterate what you're saying is there's other districts that are not represented by South Metro. There's other districts that are serving more rural areas, say even farther south. I mean, Perry Park and several others that come to mind. So we got to make sure, and that's why was recommending that we have a third-party resource, another resource, helping us develop this framework so that we don't miss rural water users as a whole, that we don't miss other districts that are smaller but not involved in that, but just as important that we capture all that. We have to also drive and depend on staff to give us the growth projections. We have commitments that we have to deal with on the metro planning aspects. Dr. Cog, I mean, they kind of divvy up that you've got to take your fair share kind of stuff. And so I think all of those things is why I think it's be important to have an individual who can help us work with those entities, put that together, and then not forget about all those, because we have to create that total framework. So I would agree totally with you on that, Frank. Yeah, Tricia?
I was just going to say, I hear a lot of discussion about rural districts, and yes, there are small rural districts like Thunderbird, Luviers, et cetera. There are also 8,000 some residences that are not involved in any district that have individual wells and use groundwater in southern Douglas County, mostly some northern, but mostly southern.
Right.
So can't forget the 8,000.
When I say rural, that's who I'm talking about, for sure. Yeah, Harold?
Well, I think there's an elephant in the room we need to deal with on this, and that is 18A. There's some proposals to move 18A that may expand the use of the aquifer. And the commissioners, I'm told, is going to refer that to this commission to look at. What comes out of that may be determinative of some of the growth projections going forward.
I think one of the things we need to do, to put on an agenda, is to go through 18A and what I like to quasi call 18B. And because we've got let's face it, we've got a non-renewable water resource. We've got everything that's been structured, most of, at least my experience in the past, on that. So when we have renewable water resources where we've got water coming, surface water, our regulations, I think, are just, we need to work on those and make some recommendations there. And I think doing that combination, we can help staff and they can help us and make some recommendations then to the commissioners as to what type of regulatory changes, which I think is one of the things they were going to be looking to us to do. So I think it would be important. One of the things we're going to tee up here soon is how does this then begin to reflect on the current regulatory and water regulations and water usage regulations within Douglas County from a land use perspective also. James?
So agree with everybody's comments about the wisdom of getting a consultant involved for the product. I guess, is the staff here at the county able to help with the RFP creation that would ultimately need to be generated to produce that? And then I don't know if there's a mechanism for us to kind of do a sounding of the county commissioners to see if that's something that they would entertain. Or
I would envision that it would probably come down something like, first off, the commissioners have to make the decision. They would use their staff then to drive how they get that. Plus, there's procurement laws the county has to follow and get some of this going anyhow, okay? But I think the key would be for us to have a recommendation, first off, that says we would like to engage a consultant. And if we have a list of recommendations or a recommendation, and one of the consultants we would like you to at least consider as part of this is XY, and we can present that to staff, and then staff can obviously take that to the commissioners at their next meeting. Then staff obviously has a procurement process that they have to follow and go through, which is totally out of our bailiwick. Because we are not quasi-judicial in reality, and we don't have spending authority or any of that. That drives out of the commissioner's office. I think what we do is we would make recommendations to move forward with something like that and then see what happens from there. It's all we can do. And at the same time, then I think we also want to make, and in our future meetings, address those other issues. I want to make sure that we do that, yes. The regulatory stuff.
Jeff,
Yes.
just a question. I want to make sure I understand what you're talking about when you talk about a consultant. You're talking about a consultant to help us develop the process as opposed to a consultant putting together the plan.
Both. We need a consultant that is.
For the latter, but maybe to help us.
Well, I think the early, here's my own personal observation anyway, the quicker you get a consultant on, then the more they've got time to investigate and more time that they need to know what they're looking for and getting together. So they can develop that framework as a whole, and help us with that framework, especially if they've done a water plan in the past. And they can from that begin to say, oh, I think you're missing this gap. And then we can begin to identify resources to help us fill in the gaps of information that we're going to need to come up with a complete plan. I'm sure that if we have consultants that have dealt with water planning before, and those water plans, they know what's going to be needed in order to come together with the plan that says this is where you're at, this is what the future shows you've got, these are your possibilities and opportunities, and here's the summary. And I would think that that's what we would be looking for. I don't think we want two different consultants, and I don't think you were saying that, but I think you were talking about what depth or nature of a consultant would we go for, right?
Yeah, because, I mean, I was very impressed with what we heard from Lisa, and it seems like they're putting together a long-term plan.
Right.
And a lot of what they will put together covers a majority of the county.
I would.
I don't want to be paying to duplicate things.
I would foresee, in my opinion, that if we had a consultant, they would be working with South Metro, and we would ask them that would be one of the entities that they would have to get information from. But then again, who's going to go out to those non-participating members and get us that information, help us with that? Who's going to help us try to drag out the Rural Water Users Authority's numbers and get what we got there? Who's somebody that's familiar with the whole framework of everything that has to be concluded, which makes us unique, I think. Then Elbert would be very similar to where we're at. They got multiple water districts that are popping up right and left, a lot of rural users with wells. And the thing is in our case, we have some more, I would hate to say it this way, but it is fact, more mature water districts that are operating and running. But if we go back in time, that's where they're at now. And so consultants that will work with them, I think would be a great idea. Consultants that are currently working with the Arapahoe and them would be good. And someone that maybe worked with El Paso, if you read their plan, El Paso's plan, it's pretty good. It's up on the, I saw it up on SharePoint, so. Yes, sir?
Clark, I agree with you, but one thing, over the years, we've learned the cheapest thing you ever gets the water. It's the distribution system. And so as we look at where these rural users are and where they are, a large part of it is going to be in part of our plan. How do we get it there? The WISE infrastructure is pretty much set through the districts, but everything else is open. So I think a large part, and I'm Ken, what you're saying, we need to include the distribution as well as the access in these rural systems. And how we get it there and how do we pay for it?
Totally, absolutely would agree. And that's where our unique situation is distribution and storage here in the county, so. Any other questions? Ideas, discussion point? Okay, so let's bring this in full circle then, and we'll tee it up this way here. I can either ask for a motion for someone to say, should we ask the staff and the commissioner to consider a consultant to help us put together this format? And I would need a motion to do that and a second. And then that would provide us some consensus direction to give to staff. Okay. So we have a motion to move forward asking staff to request a consultant to help the Water Commission draft this so that we're going to lose time if we don't. That's the problem. We all have our lives and we're doing things. This is going to help us focus is what it's going to do. James?
Second the motion.
James seconded that. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay.
I'm going to say nay. I say nay because I really don't understand yet what it is.
Right.
I think I need to see something before
So-
I can vote for it.
So Clark, I know, I respect that totally. Clark is asking for the right to say nay, so one day he can look back and say, I told you, no, just kidding. So, who was the wise man in the room? So anyhow, okay, it's respected.
Because that's what we were talking about. We didn't put all the details in the motion, but we were going to review the RFP before it goes out.
I'm assuming, and I'm just going to assume this because we haven't put the details for that, but there's a process that the county goes through, and I think I would be incredibly surprised if we were not given an opportunity to look at some of that once the commissioners have said, let's do X, Y, Z.
Well, if we get to take a look at it before we're voting, I'm fine with voting yes to have a proposal put before us, but not to approve it. without
Oh.
reading-
We're not approving
We're not
it.
Washington DC, we don't approve
No,
things
that-
before we read them.
Oh, come on. So,
Motion was that-
Can we do this? And I'm fine with that, though.
yeah.
okay. So am I saying a withdrawal of a nay?
I'll withdraw my.
Oh, you're no longer the wise man in the room, so there you go. So, all righty. Did you capture that? Okay, so I think the staff in clarification is going to move forward, and they're going to be looking at doing that. So I think it's going to be the easiest thing for us to do, because I kept trying to figure out how in the heck we're going to pull this together, and I don't have the time to do it. So I know you guys, most of you are working and stuff, so. Okay, so the next item we want to look at, that was the framework discussion, is panel discussion similar to what we've just had. So wanted to know if we should go ahead and work with staff to begin bringing in different providers and make similar presentations. Are we okay with that? So I think as part of the agenda, unless you've got a recommendation, agenda generation process, when I work with the staff to come out with the agenda for the next month, we'll come up with the schedule for who we need to bring up next. And I would really appreciate everybody, if you have any ideas of, make sure we don't forget about, like Tricia, you just brought up a good one. Let's don't forget about, and so that we can make sure we can have them in there. Because there might going to be days that it'll be 2 or 3 presentations. I would imagine 2 at the most, but it's quite a bit. Is that okay? All righty. Before we adjourn, our next thing is I want to make sure that we're all squared away and all up on, and I just wanted staff to show us a little bit about SharePoint, if we could, to make sure that we're all accessing it and getting in and doing it, okay? I made it much more complicated than it was, and so I finally got in, though.
And we have staff online that's going to bring up SharePoint to show everybody a quick tutorial of what's on there and how to access it. So you all should have received a link from Lynn Wilson providing you access to this website. This is a website that we've created for the Water Commission. The main page is just the purpose of the Water Commission, access to meeting agendas, and access to how to participate in the meetings virtually. And then if you go over to the left side, you see there's some tabs there. The most important one for this group is really that Documents tab. And that's where you're going to see we've compiled a repository of existing water plans, some county-based, some water provider-based. We've also have some general documents in there too. And Classic, if you don't mind clicking on that Documents tab, that would be helpful.
Absolutely.
And here you see those resources. We also have the Water Commission schedule, the bylaws, and your contact information, which is for really internal use amongst this commission, so you all can contact each other. But really just wanted to show that to everybody so we're all on the same page, and if there's any questions, we're here right now, but you can also reach out to us directly if you have any questions about how this is working. And any input, corrections,
Can we upload stuff, or should we?
provide that to staff. Staff will upload documents. We've already received a few requests of items to be added here. Also corrections, like you mentioned on the TAC contact list. Any input, please provide it to staff and we will address it.
Okay, good.
I think for our purposes right now, that's as far as we're going with SharePoint. Is everybody in on SharePoint? Have you had the opportunity yet? I recommend it. It's pretty good. Like I've said, I've read most everything up there, but I see something new, so I'll have to go back up and start again, I think, or something I missed. I'll put it that way. All right, before we close and adjourn, then my next question to you, I guess, is there any other discussion here? Questions, concerns? Good of the order. Then I would order a motion to adjourn, even though you don't need it. So we are adjourned at this point in time. We're out a little early. And likewise, I will roll the 7 minutes over. So, yeah.